Would you call yourself a disciplined person? Probably not. In fact, most people would actually say, if they're being honest, that they are not disciplined people. Part of that is because they don't know what goes into becoming a disciplined person, while others just choose to go the way that is wrong for them and just really doesn't lead to good things. So, if this sounds like something that you are struggling with right now, I'd like to invite you to spend the next 15 minutes with me as I teach part two of a mother's education. Today, I'm going to be sharing about the discipline of a mother's education. And with that, I'm going to be answering three very important things for you. Number one, I'm going to tell you what discipline is and why it's necessary in motherhood. Second, I'm going to tell you about what areas of life a mother should be disciplined in. And then the third thing I'm going to be sharing with you is how to become disciplined for your education. Now, if you've never met me before, I'm Dollie Freeman. I'm a self education expert using the Charlotte Mason method of education. And I'm here to equip you as a homeschooling mom in your journey to raise children with strong faith, fruitful character, noble conduct, and helping you have that wholesome education that leads to capital knowledge. I encourage you to grab paper and pen just in case you want to take some notes and help you along the way. So let's get started by unwrapping what I'm calling disciplined. I'm sorry, let me stop for a second. The discipline of a mother's education. And that will help you to understand how to have your education continuing as a homeschool mom. All right, so first of all, what is discipline? Discipline isn't correction. We often think that discipline is, in fact, that correction, but Charlotte Mason is teaching us how to be self disciplined, meaning that we are choosing to allow ourselves to be self controlled in order for us to be disciplined or habit enough to do those things which we know we ought to do. Now, I love to share some inspirations with you, but I also love to tie Charlotte Mason in with scripture. So, if you will bear with me for a moment as I talk with you about Romans 7. Romans 7 talks about how it's the battle of the will, so to speak. And if you know anything about Charlotte Mason, you know that she talks about the child's elliptical orbit. I am, I can, I ought, I will. A lot of people say that's Charlotte Mason's motto, which is true. But in the home atmosphere, that is the circumference or the elliptical orbit in which a child should stay in their own realm of the government and the family government. And a parent's elliptical orbit is, you probably guessed it, education is an atmosphere, a discipline, a life. And we often look at that as how we're supposed to be raising our children. But the fact of the matter remains is that that atmosphere, discipline, and life also starts with us. It must be part of us. So if we're expecting our children to become disciplined, not correcting and punishing them, but disciplined in the fact of having their will to go the right way, the only way that can happen is if you yourself are disciplined enough to show them the right way. So in Romans 7, it's talking about that fighting of the will, about in verses, let's see, 15 through 20, it says, "For that which I do, I allow not. For what I would, that do I not. But what I hate, that do I." And this is the struggle of Christians and those who are trying to be disciplined, regardless of what it is. If you're trying to become more healthy, maybe the food choices or the fitness choices. If you're trying to become more educated, maybe the books you read or the movies you watch or the TV time that you put in front of the hours you spend in front of social media or the television. These are all disciplines. Charlotte Mason says that habit is simply nature in action, growing stronger by exercise. And so, this is that discipline that she's talking about. And we as adults need to have that discipline in our life in part of our education. Education is the formation of habits, and the formation of habits is discipline or is education. So discipline is a part of our education. And in this Romans 7:15 through 20, it's talking about that fight of the wills and doing those things which we desire to do, but not having the will or the strength to do it. So that is what we're talking about. I encourage you to read those scriptures when you have a second. But what I want you to recognize is that it is, in fact, us building habits. That's what discipline is. And then the second part is, why is it necessary in motherhood? Well, if we're not having strong habits, disciplined in a way on which we should go as mothers, but we require that of our children, it's going to cause endless friction. What's going to happen is do as I say, not as I do. And we're parenting with wrong structure of examples in our home. And you know what's going to happen is our children are going to grow up and do those very things that we do versus doing those things we ask them to do. And so you might have had that own experience in your own home. So it's so important in motherhood is to be able to give a living example to our children of what being self-controlled, self-disciplined, and having the ability to know the right way to go, recognizing that it's a fight. It's a fight within us that we must become disciplined to do those things which we know we ought. If we're not capable to live out the I am, I can, I ought, I will, there's no way our children are going to be able to do that either. So when we know what we ought to be doing, but we can't do that next step of what we getting our will in line, that disciplined in line, we should not expect our children to do it either, because we ourselves haven't been able to conquer that. I hope this is falling on good soil here today, because I really want you to recognize that we cannot expect our children to do that which we are not able to do ourselves. We must show them. The best things I love about motherhood is that I can sit down with our children and shepherd their heart and say, you know what, honey, when I was that age, I know exactly what you were doing, because when I was faced with this temptation, the thing is I kept going the wrong way because I didn't recognize the consequences, or I didn't recognize the outcome that was going to happen to me. But when I realized that I had to stop doing that and start doing this, these good things came. And so having your own stories and relating to your children and how you were able to not just do I ought, but yes, I ought, you were able to then do the will. So showing yourself disciplined in motherhood is a living example you need to be demonstrating to your children as often as possible. So what areas of life should a mother be disciplined in? Well, I hope you have your paper and pen, because these areas are crucial. So I want you to recognize that mothers are a unique breed. Mothers are definitely a call to recognize there is a lot of good in the hands of a mother. And we can choose to grow really good things with our hands, or we can tear them down. And so when we recognize that we need to have particular disciplines in certain areas, we'll recognize that in those disciplines, we are either building up or tearing down. So that starts with our words. We must be disciplined with our words. We must be able to calm ourselves enough to be able to choose our words wisely. This has not been a God-given talent of mine. I've had to learn how to tame my tongue. The Bible tells us about how the tongue is the hardest muscle of the body to discipline, to take care of. And I can tell you from personal experience that is 100% the case. The tongue is the hardest. So we must be disciplined in what we speak. We must be disciplined in what we think, because in our thought process is where the tongue, the Bible tells us, out of the heart, the mouth speaks. So we must be careful about what we're reflecting on, because eventually it'll be what we're speaking. We also must be very diligent in disciplining our emotions or our mood. This is why my newsletters are talking to the calming influences to the heart of a mother, helping a mother to learn how to be calm in motherhood, helping our mothers to learn how to be joyful, how to be content, how to be all those disciplines in life, in the emotions and the moods that we have in order to be able to do that. We also must be disciplined, not only in our words, not only in our thoughts and our heart, but also in our mood. And the other thing is, we need to be disciplined in our actions, what it is that we're doing day in and day out. I have a quick little illustration of what that means. When I was a young mother, I did what my mother did growing up. I would sit and watch afternoon television, which means soap operas. I did not recognize that it was wrong. I did not recognize that I really shouldn't be wasting my day with television like this. And in fact, I would spend years watching soap operas. My house was still clean, dinner was still on the table, so it wasn't keeping me from important things. But what it was doing is putting things in my heart that was totally not godly. It was totally not realistic. And it was causing me to be discontented. It was causing me to having the living examples of things our children shouldn't be doing, sitting in front of the TV. So when I enforced that, no television is on until 4 o'clock in the afternoon with my children when they were oh so little, it wasn't just for them, it was for me. It was for me to keep that TV off, to stop and discipline myself in turning the TV off and not having it on until after the soap operas are off. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they're no longer available. So that's where 4 o'clock came into our day. Now the TV doesn't turn on until usually around 7 o'clock at night. And I prefer that because it allows us to have more time and it really keeps us disciplined in life better. But I remember putting that in place, and our children couldn't wait till 4 o'clock to be able to watch a show while I was making dinner. But these are the living examples we want to give to our children in how we're disciplining ourselves. So I want you to be thinking of your words, your thoughts, your moods, and your actions, how it is that we're able to overcome so many things and to be disciplined in them. And, we're talking about understanding why we do certain things. We act and we also react. And so I want you to get really disciplined in why you're doing a certain thing and why you're reacting a certain way. And then finally, I want to talk about how to become disciplined for your education. When we are thinking about this struggle of the will, knowing what we ought to do, like it talks about in Romans 7, and how we're fighting against it. We know what we ought to do, but we end up doing the thing that we hate. It's so hard to make that shift from we ought to we will. So, how do we get there? Well, how you get there is you get really focused and you switch it off. Just like when I stopped those daily soap operas in my life, I had to say the TV stays off until 4 o'clock. I had to give myself an action that was tangible for me. I needed to have something to say, okay, so the clock says it's 4. I've got past this day. And I had to just keep working on it. And yes, I actually stopped cold turkey. I've never had the TV on during the day at all. Well, unless it was educational and it was a sick day or something like that. But we do not have the TV on until about 7 o'clock at night. So the key thing is, I want you to focus on changing your behavior. That's the only way. Habit is simply nature, what we normally would do, nature in action, growing stronger by exercise. So we have to do something different. So I want you to be thinking about, what can I do in place of to grow better? So if you're struggling with, I have an empty bowl in front of me that had something that I was snacking on during lunch. I could have easily filled this up with chocolate chips, which is something that I love, dark chocolate chips once in a while, but throwing nuts in here, that's a simple thing. It still, helps me to have something to snack on when I need it, but putting something else in it is a discipline. So I want you to focus on changing your behavior, doing one thing differently than the other. Now, if you are struggling with your mood, if you're struggling with your thoughts and you really need some help and the calming influences to the heart, and you're really wanting help in this discipline of your education as a mother, I really would encourage you to enroll in this newsletter. It's free to you. charlottemasonmastery.com/calming. By subscribing, you not only get these newsletters that will encourage you, inspire you, and motivate you in those things of motherhood as a homeschooling mom. You will also get access to the searchable database of my past and future shows that you can access and just go in and type in a keyword or a phrase and be able to get right to that in the videos and be able to have them at your fingertip. And I'd love to be able to do that for you moms. All right, so I have a few comments. I'm going to get into the comments here. I made it. Yay. We have been messaging back and forth. Hello, Samantha. It's good to have you here. Yes, I love it when people can come live. The Learning Mom says, for me, it's Korean drama. No more Netflix now in my iPad until I form my will in this aspect. That is wonderful. And a lot of people would say no electronics, and I don't feel that's realistic. There are so many good things with electronics. What we have to do is have that discipline. People just don't have discipline. I'm telling on my husband here really quick. My husband grew up with no television at all, none. So when we got in, when we started dating, he would come to my house and my dad would have the TV on and he would sit for hours and just enjoy the television with my daddy. And then we got married. We waited a bit before we had television. And then when we brought a television in, it was like he could not give me any attention. I mean, I could be totally talking to him and he wouldn't hear me, to the point where I would be saying, the monkeys are on the chandelier, the elephant is in the living room, and the giraffe is in the shower. I would say funny things just to keep going to see how long before he heard me speaking nonsense. So it's really not about the device or the electronics. It's the discipline that goes with it. Are you able to shut it off? Are you able to use it for good? And that is the key. So I want you to continue to work on this discipline of your education and recognize that your elliptical orbit is to create that atmosphere, that discipline, that life. We're going to be talking about the life of a mother's education next week at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, same place, streaming on Facebook and YouTube. But what I want you to recognize is that your elliptical orbit and that you need to be a living example to your children. They're influenced by your life at home. So, how about focusing on your discipline to help your children in theirs? And recognize that discipline is a good thing, but it requires habits that become part of your nature, that is in action, that grows stronger with exercise. So be focused on that. Do your best to try to find something to change your behavior in and focus really hard on those words, the moods, the thoughts, and your actions, and it will help you in that discipline. And remind yourself, I am, I can, I ought, I will is not just for the children, it's for every person. And remind yourselves of Romans 7 about how it is, in fact, a battle to not just know what we ought to do, but make ourselves to do it. And that's through self-discipline. I'll see you next time. Keep doing what you're doing. It's well worth the work. The efforts are there and it can be difficult at times, but the reward is wonderful. Until next time, I'll see you then. Bye for now.